Good morning, everybody. I'm Julia Gerlach, Executive Editor with No-Till Farmer. Welcome to today's No-Till Farmer webinar. And today we are very fortunate to have with us Dan Forgey. He is joining us from Cronin Farms, where he's the Agronomy Manager. Cronin Farms is located in Gettysburg, South Dakota, and it's owned by Monty and Mike Cronin. Today, Dan is going to discuss how the operation has adopted cover crops in a diversified no-till system and how that has helped them to manage moisture, cycle nutrients, increase organic matter, control pests and weeds, and more. And also joining us is Brandon Middendorp, who is Regional Sales Manager with LaCrosse Seed. Before I turn things over to Dan, I just have a couple of housekeeping items I want to make you aware of. On your screen, there is a control panel with a Q&A icon. That should be probably at the bottom of your screen. And that will allow you to submit questions at any time during the presentation. And we're going to get to those questions at the end of the presentation. So as you think of them, go ahead and pop those into the Q&A. If for any reason the webinar is disrupted or you're seemingly disconnected from the webinar, just go back to the invitation email that you received and rejoin the webinar through the link in that email. With that said, thanks again for joining us. And now I'm going to turn things over to Dan Forgey. Dan, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Julia. You know, as we go forward with this, I'm going to say I'm just a farmer, and all I'm trying to do is sell soil health. And you know, as you go forward with this, I really like this quote: "Earth provides enough to satisfy every man's need, but not every man's greed." You know, and a lot of that, I think we have to really take that to heart and remember that as we go forward on our journey to make our soils better. We're living in central South Dakota, as you guys said, is with 18 and a half inches of rainfall. We are just like everybody. We had 9.7 last year. Now this year we're right back on course again. So kind of an up and down. So as I talk about this, you guys remember that we're in what I consider a lower rainfall environment. Our farm in 2022 got 10,000 acres and 600 under pivot. We've been no-tilling since 1993, and that's been a big key to our success. We have 8,500 grass, which is on the Missouri River breaks, and they run 850 cow-calf pairs and the 850 mother cows, and you can see it's very well managed. And them guys, when you talk about soil health, I mean the younger generation, they're really stepping up and taking care of this. So this is our pasture, and you can see it's pretty wide. It's rough. It's got cricks in it, which I really like because there'll never be an attempt to farm it, and I think that's a huge thing. The green box on the bottom is where we bring our cows in the wintertime to feed, and so you see we don't have a lot of area, and that's kind of a concern. And this is one of our steps we're taking to minimize the damage to the crop from overgrazing when we bring the cows home. Our family won the Leopold Award in 2016, and I really am proud of that. I mean, when I first started, I'm on my fourth generation on the farm working with them, and I was thinking about retiring, but not for very long, because I want to help this younger generation succeed, and they're doing a very good job of following on. So we were involved with Howard Buffett, and he had this book, The 40 Chances, and he said you got 40 chances in your life as farming to do the right thing. And I've had 53 and years to try to get it right. And what is sad, the first 24 years I did everything that can destroy the soil. And what you guys hear is what I live. And this ain't something that I've heard from somebody else. What I'm talking about is the things that I've lived through and how my journey to learn the importance of soil health. Farming the 70s to 80s, no one had to teach us. We already knew how to raise 35 bushel wheat, 50 bushel corn. And then it was kind of when the wind blew, you were afraid, you didn't look out to the west, or because you knew that was probably one of our fields in the air, because it was left bare all summer long, and we didn't understand anything about the concept of soil health. And on the average, we worked 14 times. The soil was worked 14 times in 4 years and harvested 3 crops in 4 years. And the sad thing is we considered ourselves good farmers at that time. And there's one thing I know how to do. I learned how to do this, and that's how to destroy our soil organic matter. We didn't realize we were doing that. I mean, no one was there to really teach us or tell us that we were doing that. And it's really sad. And I think that there's a lot of people that it's still happening to. So I really take what I'm doing to heart if I can help somebody in their journey. Changes happen when the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of change. And that's kind of what happened to us, because we were kind of like we hit a brick wall. We were really poor rotations, and we seemed to be running into a lot of, even when we got rain, we were running into drier years. But this is basically why we changed. And so here's our yields in our early years, and you can see they're nothing to be proud of. But at that time, we felt we were doing all right. I mean, if it wouldn't have been the burden of the 80s, going through the 80s, where we felt we had to change, that we would have, but we were the first ones to adapt, and I'm glad we did. And this is one of the reasons that the main reason that got us going. And Dwayne Beck, he was the manager of Dakota Lake Research Farm, and he just stepped down and turned it over to Sam Ireland about 8 months ago. But Dwayne was one of these guys that he was on our farm quite a lot. He got his PhD done on our pivots, and he's come up and said, "Why aren't you guys no-tilling?" And in our area, Ralph Holsworth was the first one, and then we started the next one. And that was the first no-till in the area. I know there's a lot of people that have been no-tilling longer than we have, but in our area, we were the first 2 farmers. I really believe on our farm, it's really helped us to limit our disturbances, because it helps build soil aggregates and pore space, and the soil biology. We're not destroying it, and we're gaining organic matter. So in 31 years of no-till, you can see where we were in 93. We've doubled our acres, and then we've stopped using a lot of diesel fuel. So we're really helping the environment in a way, and we're 100% no-till now, and we've raised 14 different crops, but we're getting 24% better yields, and sometimes more than that. So we have an 1895 drill, and the one thing I like this, in April, we go and we start planting our cereals, and if we're going to have flax, field peas, or lentils, we put them in, and then in June we plant our sorghums and Sudan grasses, and then mid-July is the mid-season cover crops, or if we're going to go to a grazing cover crop. In August is cover crops, and September is winter wheat. And as you notice, even behind our corn planter, we pull that cart. So we apply all of our, not all of it, 90% of our fertilizer goes into soil at seeding. And we've been doing that for a long time. And then we have a 24-row corn planter, and we go May corn and soybeans, and June sunflowers. And again, I mean, it's we're applying just about all our fertilizer with that cart. Cost-effective nitrogen management is the key to profitability and productivity farming. It is also the key to building soil carbon. Stable forms of soil carbon, such as humus, cannot form in the presence of high level of inorganic nitrogen due to the innervation of the microbes essential to sequestration. And you think about that, the guy don't do it, and we've had this time and time again, probably 5 or 6 times where we've ran tests, and we've had people involved with it from universities. And anytime we put too much fertilizer on, our yield drops some. And what we're doing is we're not letting the soil work for us. I'm not saying you cold turkey say I'm going to quit all my fertilizer, but I think we're really over fertilizing. And I think that's why some of the reasons why our pH is dropping some is because we're over fertilizing. We soil sampled, we're variable rated, and I think that's great because it's helped with our fertilizer management. And so what we do is we'll take 4 things, satellite maps, elevation, whatever, make a variable rate map. And then we'll assign different zones to different, so we'll take a different yield goal in every one of our zones. So actually what we're doing is we're not over fertilized. And then one thing that we really have to take into consideration, a lot of time your better zones where we used to just say, well, we need all kinds of nitrogen because that we went through there a few years ago and we had 200 bushel corn or 100 bushel wheat. Well, what happens? You over fertilize and then your pH is dropping more in the better zones, and we're not letting the soil, the organic matter work for us. And I think that's really a key to what we're doing. And then another thing, and I think this should be a movement, I think there should be more done of this, is we're capable of variable rating 3 products. So why aren't we variable rating cover crops? I mean, there's a lot of like this, the poorest soils might take a more high carbon cover crop. And I just think we need to get into that and figure out what we could do to do it. Like if you have a spot that's got salinity in it, I think we should be looking to do that. Then we have to keep our soil covered, because I think that you look down at your soil and you should never see the soil. You should be looking through residue. Are we the first to do this? You know, Thomas Jefferson did this, and as you guys read through what he did here, I'm not going to read it to you, but he knew they had to do something different. And as he did this, everything he was doing was he was trying to hold his soil in place, and then he was also wanted to benefit. But if you look at that deal, even, you know, on that number 7, he sowed buckwheat and then turned that in, which, you know, but anyway, right now everybody will tell you that buckwheat enhances phosphorus. So, you know, you think, well, we're just on the cutting edge here, and you look back and a lot of our forefathers were they knew what they were doing. Kansas has then stated that a mulch of more than 75% soil cover can reduce evaporation during the growing season of corn by 3 inches of rainfall. On, you know, and that's really important for us. And I don't know about you guys, but you know, you'll see a lot of people that'll be in a higher rainfall environment, and they'll have a pivot, and all they want to do is when the moisture gets short on them, they want to put a little more on. And with us, this is our answer here: is we keep our ground covered. We want to keep all that moisture for the crop. So as you look at this, the soil bacteria starts dying at 113, and then under 95, 100% of the moisture is used for the crop growth. And I think that's really important. You know, I've got some that I saw this, and this is from NRCS, and I went out in one of our fields last year, cornfields, and I did the same thing, and it was 105 that day, and our ground temperature was 106, and then where it had mulch was 88. So I mean, there's a lot of truth to that. And this is another NRCS for 75 degrees, 1 inch of water a week. So let's just say you can keep your soil at 85 degrees, 2 inches of water a week, and you look down to what that amounts to. And I just think that's terribly important for going forward, even when a guy doesn't have you know, even if you're in a high rainfall, because you know as well as I do that rainfall might not last all summer. So here's in our midterm. So we felt we were doing really good, you know, about 2003, 2004. The longer you're in no-till, the more you go through from the first 5 years, and then the next 10 years, and the next 15. Then you just every 5 years it gets better. But you can see our yields. You notice I said yield goals. I'm not saying yields. This is our yield goals. And we felt pretty good about these because we doubled our corn, doubled our spring wheat. I mean, so we really felt good about this. Then diversity. You need diversity. You need to try to mimic nature with the cool and seeded grasses and broadleaf plants. And I really think 3 is not quite enough in the crop in the rotation. We do 4 or 5, but I still think that a guy needs to do some. The focus on being proactive about preventing problems from happening rather than constantly reacting to the latest problems that occurred. And that's a statement from Dwayne, and I think about that a lot, because instead of putting a Band-Aid on something, you go and try to figure out where the hurt's coming from, and then try to head that off, just like with our rotations, and that's what we're trying to do with our rotations and cover crops. This is where we first started when we first started no-tilling, and the main reason is 2 wheats is because we had before Freedom to Farm, we had to preserve our wheat base. And then the corn and sunflowers, sunflowers on corn is just second nature out here. And in our county, we were the first ones to do it. And then Dwayne was on the lead of that. And Dwayne said, there's just something happens when you plant sunflowers on corn. And then come to find out, the sunflowers are very mycorrhizal. Dave Frenson from NDSU, the fertilizer guy, he says that he doesn't recommend using any phosphorus on sunflowers. So we're on this rotation, and we thought we were really doing what we should. Then the cheatgrass figured us out. That's just like any time you stay in a rotation, it doesn't take you long. Like the second time through, we could start to see this was happening. So anyway, the insects or the grasses or the weeds will figure it out. So you've got to kind of trick them. And this is working with rotations on our farm, and why we're doing it. And we think the carbon to nitrogen ratio is very important, and we want to stay as many high carbon crops as we can, and 70% high residue, the minimum. Chemical rotation, how much that's really helping. You can't take that away. That's a very important part. And then cash crop, we still have to remember, no matter what you're doing for soil health, you have to show that you are making money, and not, as you're building health, building soil health, learn how to work with that. It takes time, and it's not going to happen overnight. In fixing crop, managing low carbon crops, and I think that's very important, not to get too many low carbon crops in a row. And then with us, planting and harvest time and getting the most out of what you have, and that's the key, because we've got we don't jam everything into the fall. We've got all season to get stuff done. These are our crops we've raised on our farm, and you can see our major crops and then our minor crops. But as you notice, 73% are high residue crops of our major crops, and we want to stay that. We want to stay high residue crops. There's a guy in Sully County where he just wrote a new lease, and that was a requirement that every fourth year, because you could have a low residue crop. By doing this, we started putting carbon into the system, and it really made a lot of difference, because we could see this. When we talk about this, you guys, so this happened. This is 8, 9, 10 years after we started no-tilling, so this takes some time, but you can see where we're going and what we can do. And by doing this, we started increasing organic matter and gaining soil health. And I just can't emphasize what a difference it makes. But one thing about it, if a guy is on this journey, congratulations. And if you're not, I would like to see you get on. This is one of our, this is a sunflower field. I just want to show you the amount of residue we hold. Our soils are pretty mature. And as I say that, so the microorganisms don't break stuff down quite as fast, because there's usually enough stuff to eat besides the residue in our soils. No-till captures carbon and organic matter, which is full of nutrients. So yes, the tillage pass will release those nutrients, causing the crop response, but then you are back to square one. It's like burning your house for heat. You did get some heat, but you destroyed your house. And just think about that. Every time you work the soil, that's what happens. I had one guy say, no-till's really good. The only thing is if you could just get by turning the soil about every 4 years, I think it's a lot better. And And when you do that, basically starting over from square one again. So these are our center pivots again. So we were corn, soybean, just like everybody else, because that's we felt where you could make the most money, and that's what, you know. So we were doing that. We were corn on corn for 16 years, and then we put soybeans in the rotation, and we were raising good yields. And then just like everybody, white mold comes. So what do? Do we go to the fungicide? So what we elected to do is we put spring wheat in a rotation. The spring wheat is seed wheat. It's usually foundation. It's either foundation or registered seed wheat. And then we planted covers after the spring wheat. Be careful what you put in with your covers where you don't carry over with the white mold. And then cattle in mid-November, and then we basically turned ourselves around by breaking up the rotation. The one thing we have to remember, how long do you stay on this rotation? Because we'll get figured out after a while. The fifth principle is living roots. Our first cover crop was in 2006. You can see we only had 13.7, just about 14 inches of rain, and we wondered why we did it. And Dwayne kind of talked us into doing this, and he was nervous enough where that fall of 2007, he came up and rode in the combine with me. But it worked. But as you see, the carbon to nitrogen ratio was 20-1, and you can see that's not we should have been higher. We should have had something. We had too many low carbon crops in there. One thing as I'm on this slide, you guys, and I know you guys probably realize this, but just like the difference between vegetative rye and anthesis rye, how much more carbon you have, how hard it's going to be to break down. So this is why you need to really work with your seed suppliers to figure out what carbon to nitrogen ratio you really need, what you really want. And just like ryegrass is basically rye vegetation is 15-1. But so you can really change your carbon to nitrogen ratio by what you do. This is a low carbon cover crop, and the reason it is planted on really heavy residue, but you can see the flax, and there's kale and collards and flax, and a lot of times I won't use turnips or radishes unless we're going to graze. So this is mostly this is just about all low carbon cover crops because we already have a lot of residue. And this is this cover crop is higher, and this we're going to graze, and so this we hope to end up with about like a 27-1, and but you can see it is a good grazer, and we did graze this particular cover crop and had good success with it. So we talk about prevent plant. I know we've ran into prevent plant. There's a lot of prevent plant going east of us. I know there's a tremendous amount. And all I'm going to say is when you run into this, you get together, Brandon. This was planted on winter wheat stubble. So get together, Brandon, and find out what you guys need for what. One size doesn't fit all. But as you notice on my mix sheet over there, is I always try to find out what the carbon to nitrogen ratio is. And right now I didn't really need a lot of carbon because it's going to go back to spring wheat. And then you notice I have flax in there. I love flax. Flax is very mycorrhizae, but we had enough moisture. So a lot of times on my mix, I'll have that percent turn out to 100. And here I went 113 because we had enough moisture. We needed to use some of the moisture, so that's why I went a little over. If I would have been a little short on moisture, it would have stayed at 100% of the mix. And this is prevent plant going to corn, and I changed up a little bit because I put more higher carbon in it, and I stayed at 108 because corn's a little higher water use than wheat, so I just cut back to 108, but you can see some of the things I had in there. And the one thing you'll notice too is I very seldom, I'm not saying uh, the canola dwarf rape. I kind of stay away from it because it goes to seed mills, and you'll see it in your corn the next year, and kind of a little hard to control. True soil conservation is more related to plant management than soil management, because plants provide carbon from the atmosphere to the soil. You know, and that's there's a lot to that. I mean, so if I know you should always look what you're doing underneath the soil, but there's only one way to feed them plants, and that's going to bring carbon. And so I think that's really important. Here's something that I've tried 2 different years, and I think it's an all right deal if a guy, especially if a guy has or cutting it for forage but so all I did was right when the corn was spiking, I went out and just split the rows. At that time I used forage soybeans, and the second time group 7 soybeans you can get about Arkansas. Because they will not set pods, they will not bloom. But this is the pictures of it growing in there, and then this is the aftermath after we cut silage. So you think, will we really have a lot of moisture that year? Well, here's a picture of no soybeans and forage soybeans. So we actually thought that was from lack of moisture, but the soybeans did something to them, because just look at the ear tip back on the stuff without soybeans. So there's something to that, you guys. I think that's really worth playing with, especially if you're a cattle guy and looking for forage, or it could be a really good graze too if you had gonna graze some corn. 2008, we planted cover crops, and you can see our mix. And you guys forget about these costs on here, because a lot of times we raise that stuff ourselves, and we're just in the learning curve. But anyway, we planned on volunteer pea ground. So then I thought, well, that's really a good deal. Cover crop up in 35 days. But where's the carbon? I just went through this in 2006. I turned right around and did it again. The cattle liked it. We brought the cattle home, and they grazed for quite a while on that. The cattle liked it. I mean, once you graze cattle on cover crops, I mean, they're really hesitant about coming to the feed wagon, because they want to be out grazing. As we go forward with the 5th principle is integrating livestock, and that's sometimes really hard to do. But when you do this, so you don't always have to have your own cattle. You can also get cattle brought in, but you have to have a plan. You can't just turn them loose. You have to have a plan and say, this is what we expect. And we grazed this in 2015, and the seed. And this is how I kind of switched gears on this, because you can see it's really I think that's way too many products in a. And I just thought the more you can get, the better it is. And I don't necessarily mean that. I see that now. I think you need to cut them back. And I mean, like right now, like if I get 5 or 6, that's plenty. And then I put a little urea on and some AMS. And the only thing that was probably an all right deal, because the cover crops liked it. Did we get our money back? I don't think so. I don't know, because we never left a strip. And that's where as we go forward, I'll show you what it means to leave a strip, to what you get out of leaving a strip. So basically, it's 34. We grazed a month for 34 cents a day, and that was a win-win for the soil and for the cattle. Average temperature is 22 degrees. I was up in Dickinson, and Toby Stowe said, when you graze cover crops, you do not lose residue, you just cycle it faster. And you think about that, because when they eat that, they're going to keep 20%, and the cow is, and 80% is going to go out the back end in either urine or manure. And just think that, basically, if you want to cycle your nutrients, I mean, the cattle is how to get it done, but you'll see that picture down below. That's the residue that I would like to see. That's what we want to leave right now. We want to leave a third. Let them have a third. leave it there. That's why I think it's so important about taking a biomass sample, so you know how much you got, you know how much you can feed, and you know how many days you can feed it. You know, I talked to Brandon about this yesterday in the management cover crop profitability, when you mow, whenever stalks reach 3 to 4 foot tall and leaving 6 inches stubble, you increase your mass roots 5 to 8 times, and when you cut it, they immediately go deeper. And then two that's 2 weeds, 2 weeks after cutting and 5 weeks after cutting. But Brandon, when we were talking yesterday, we were talking some on prussic acid. And do you have any one of these that you would like, or what should we be worried about grazing on prussic acid on an early crop?
Well, I think the main concern is when the plants are stressed and after a frost. That's the watchouts with a sorghum sedan grass. There is, say pearl millets that's very similar to a sorghum sedan grass that maybe we can mitigate some of that risk by having a plant that's not going to have that prussic acid concern. So there's other options there too that are very similar to sorghum sedan grass, but that's certainly a watch out when you're using sorghum sedan grasses.
Thanks, Brandon. That's because I think that's really important. And this is the aftermath. So we harvested 3 ton, and as Brandon said, we use 40% forage sorghum, 30% pearl millet, and 30% Piper sedan grass. Piper sedan grass is really a fine stem, and the reason I like that, it dries down. It yields well, but it helps keep the helps to dry down in the windrow. And this is our bulls, and we wintered them on this, and we've done it 5 years in a row, and even last year when it was so dry, we had very easily it'll come back waist high again. If you get it cut by the 1st of September, it'll be waist high. I mean, this is a win-win, because look at the time we brought carbon into the system with this. I mean, I just think it's great, because that's the main thing we want to harvest, carbon from the air. And when I talked about down at the circles, and this is our calves, and the boys, they wean their calves, fence line wean them on grass, and just take the cows away and leave the calves where they were grazing. And this particular year, we had a really nice field of covers, and basically what they did was they put everything out there, and they just took the cows away, and the cows taught the calves how to graze the covers. And the calves didn't really their moms missed the calves didn't miss their mom. Grazing covers, and we really tried to work on this is because we know what it cost us, and that number varies, that cost per day, but we really wanted to figure out how we could save some money by grazing. And we kind of went after this pretty hard. And in 2017, we went, and this is the mix I come up with, and I thought it was going to be 38 to 1. I took all of what it was. Diversity, I liked the 10, I liked the grazing score. But everything I put in this mix, there was a reason for it. And I really wanted to emphasize the mycorrhizae association. The one thing about the kale is crude protein, and then but the buckwheat, it enhances phosphorus. So you remember back when we were talking about how they use buckwheat, but anyway, this was a big study. We took a quarter section. It was teff grass, and we went after it, and and we put this full season cover in there. And the idea was to plant it. We planted it the first week of July, and we were going to see how long we could graze our cows on this when we brought them home in December. One thing I did, and a lot of people said we shouldn't, is I put 30 pounds of nitrogen on when we seeded, and you can see where we did put nitrogen on. So we also had a strip of 3-way mix over that diversified mix, and it was a high carbon mix, and we really wanted to get answers. And this is where Dwayne Beck and Jason Miller really stepped up and let me carry this through, because I want, everybody says, Tom Cannon from Oklahoma, he says that he puts a little bit down, but Christine Jones said you shouldn't do it. You're not letting the soil work for yourselves. But you get back to the economics here, and we'll show you in the slides going forward. So we really getting back to biomass samples. This is the 12-way within, and so you can see the amount of biomass or the nutrients we got, the carbon and the nitrogen that we got from where we put a little more. We put that 30 pounds of N on. That 12-way no end is exactly the same, except the N was cut off. And so I gained a lot more. The carbon to nitrogen ratio was higher, but then look at the 3-way, and you look at the amount of carbon that we had, but you had more carbon, but you didn't have the feed quality. So here's the dry biomass. We did it in August. Jason came up and helped me do this. We did it in August. So you can see the 3-way dry biomass. We had more dry biomass, but then look at the protein. And then the 12-way, August 28th, we had 8,000 pounds of dry biomass. And then look at the relative feed value. And then, but look at the protein. This carbon to nitrogen ratio was 25-1. Without N, we had a 38-1. We had a better carbon to nitrogen ratio. But look what we did to our dry biomass. So if you're trying to pencil this out, the picture in the background is our cover crop as when it was right before we grazed. Okay, we had 650 head cows grazed in January, so 35 pounds in at planting. We had 5,400 pounds of biomass that we were going to graze, because we're going to leave a third. We're going to leave a third. We're going to take 66. So we had 37 grazing days, and with no N, we had 27 grazing days. So you take 650 cows and figure out what it costs. So you can see we paid for that. But see, I really believe we had paddocks. The boys, they made paddocks cross fenced, and they really, it really helped. We kept track of the temperature. We looked forward. So one paddock we might stay on 6 days. One paddock we might stay on 9 or 10 days, because we knew what we had. We knew the protein we had. Everything was set except the temperature. So if it got real cold, we moved quicker. But it really worked out well. I mean, it worked out well. And then this is another one that I want to thank Jason for, is that we did a nitrogen study, and as you look at that sideband N, so wherever there's an N, that means we went over the top with UAN. We were trying to see how much we were gaining by a sideband. When we sideband our dry products, it's with the it's 3 inches over and 2 inches down, and so that 9 pounds is just with the starter fertilizer in it, and then so we gained, without anything, we had 133 bushel. And the protein we had 7.7 protein. But as you go through that deal, at 69 pounds with going 69 units going with UAN, it's 149 bushel. But the one that really impressed me is when we sideband her in 120 pounds. So with our carryover, we had 150 pounds. We had 185 bushel yield. But this is what I was saying earlier. So you look down, that 180 pounds of in the sideband, we lost yield. So I remember when I said earlier, I think you lose yield, and we've done this 4 or 5 different years. Every time you over fertilize, you're using yield. And what I'm saying is, I think you have to have the soil work for you. And right now on our farm, we use 0.9. A lot of guys use less, but we kind of 0.9 is the sweet spot. And Jason's the one. This is I want to give him a lot of credit. He really helped me a lot. We were working on 60-inch corn, and we found out in our environment it doesn't quite work because there's not. For one thing, they're just we don't have enough moisture, and we got hurt on yield. It cost us about 20 bushel. We just had a 40-acre strip in there, but it cost us about 40 bushel over the normal. So I'm not saying it won't work for some people. It just won't work in our low rainfall environment. And I use the organic matter. I don't really count on that all the time. I kind of leave it alone. I don't take credit for it when we do our soil test. It's in our savings account. And, and what we're trying to learn, and we're always learning, is to farm for maximum profit, not maximum yield. Jay Pierre, Trey Cronin, he's the guy running the farm now. If you have more carbon entering the soil than leaving, your kids will probably farm the land. If you have more carbon leaving than entering, they probably will not. There's a lot to that. Carbon ingredients, you guys, and just stop thinking. The more you can bring in, and because 57% of organic matter is carbon, and that's really important. Benefits of organic matter, and it's really, the more you can focus on learning on organic matter and what its purpose is the better off you're going to be. We had grass that hadn't been farmed after the 30s, well, before that, when they moved out of this country. It was in a homestead. It was broke up and then planted back to grass. We had 5.1 after 60 years. Our farm average at that time was 2.8. 2001 was 2.8. And a lot of organic matter now is around 4 to 5. And then how do you increase it? Reduce, eliminate tillage, reduce erosion. And I think soil test and fertilize properly, because I don't think you want to over fertilize. I think that's really a downfall. And then grow cover crops when you can. You look at the mycorrhizae, and this is a pine seedling, and that's all mycorrhizae. So how do they grow in the middle of rocks? They go out and they find the mycorrhizae. And we think another thing, we're on the cutting edge. And Sarah Wright in 1996 from the ARS, she's the first one that came out and discovered a glomalin, which is a substance that creates clumps of soil to hold the aggregates. And this also keeps the soil carbon from escaping. And so all this is a lot newer than we think. Mycorrhizae fungi will take carbon from the roots and exchange nutrients, organic nitrogen for inorganic phosphorus. That soil health is difficult to obtain, hard to maintain, and easy to destroy. I really believe that. The easiest source of soil microbes is sugar obtained from living plants. The next easiest food source is dead plant roots, followed by above ground residue. When the above are not available, at last resort, the microbes will feed on existing organic matter. This is our winter wheat stubble, and basically there for a few years when we were getting going, you'd go in, and there wasn't any roots to it. It'd just blow down, and what it was the microorganisms were eating the roots, because they'll eat that, then they'll start eating, working on the organic matter. This is our farming trend on our organic matter, and they don't always go up. Like last year, you're going to drop because we had a lot of mineralization we didn't have enough for the microorganisms to eat, and we got a late rain, and nothing was green for them to eat. I think a guy really has to pay attention to this. So this is, you can just about take that number times 2 right now, the value of the percent of organic matter. So this is our yields. This is our yields at present, and I'm saying yield goals. I'm not saying our yield goal on corn is a little better than that, none. But anyway, and we're doing this, you guys. I mean, if we have even a normal year, we're doing this, and all that is our journey through soil health to make things work. And you know, another take home is nothing can stop the man with the right mental attitude from achieving his goals. Nothing on earth can help the man with the wrong mental attitude. So when you go forward to this, I don't think you want to do it all just in and 100%. Try stuff on a small scale. And then another thing, if you're not doing any one of these practices, don't think just because you're not doing them all, you're gonna be a failure. Just start doing something. And then a great deal of carbon once stored in the soil is now stored in the atmosphere, and we all know that. Are we doing our part to change this? And why should we care? And that's why we should care, you guys, is the future generations. Okay, thanks, you guys.
Well, great. Thank you, Dan. That was excellent. Went through a lot of information really fast, and hoping everybody's going to get their questions in the Q&A. Before we turn to those Q&A from the attendees, I just wanted to quick ask, you had mentioned a cover crop mix for salinity, and I know that your area has a lot of issues with that. I was just wondering, I didn't catch it. You went kind of fast, but one of them was sugar beets, and then I'm not sure what the other one was in there. But I was wondering if you could just talk about how those particular species help with salinity, and then also where do you plant those? Because my understanding of a saline seep is that it's a matter of the moisture moving through, like from a high area down to a low area. So are you planting those up on the high area or on the low area, or both?
You know, Julia, the thing like with us is we'll put higher carbon crops on our I'm not going to say porous soils, because I don't believe there's a porous soil. Man made it a porous soil. So the less productive soils will build the residue up, and then on the salinities will be any salinity spots. On your question there is a lot of times you'll use forage barley. We've tried sugar beets, and sugar beet seed is a lot of times you get the sugar beet seed that's already might be a year old or something, and the germ isn't very good. We haven't had very good luck. Another thing we've had some luck on with and not bad salinity, but salinity, and we've used dry before. We use dry, and then we harvest it and we bale it. So actually we're letting the plant take the crop up, just like the barley, the forage barley. If you plant that forage barley and you let the plant take it up, and then you cut it, and then you haul the salt off, you go feed it.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. All right. Great. Well, we do have some questions from our participants. Gary Kemnick would like you to define soil health. This is always such a great question. Can you define soil health?
Define soil health.
Yeah.
You know, I'm going to use a phrase that Dwayne Beck always uses, just like what I think a beautiful woman looks like and what another beautiful woman looks like is completely different. And so your soil health is having your soil more resilient and be able to stand so it'll hold the water, it'll withstand the drought. And so, you know, you look at that trying to explain soil health. I'd like him to come to our farm and I'll show him soil health. Just like on the pictures of that soil, them were all taken on our place. So it's hard. It's a lot easier to show it than it is to explain soil health.
Yeah.
That's not a very good answer, but that's.
Yeah. Okay. Gary also says, I would agree with your statement and your slide on diversity. How far can you take this idea?
On diversity, I think you can take it a long ways. But one thing that I really think, if you're going to do it, and it's kind of the best way to do it and how we got started is if you plant something, you go find the market before you plant it. And a lot of times the last time this big corn run went, we started looking, there wasn't any people planting many crops, and so we started planting flax and then we started planting forage barley and selling it for seed. And you look at right now and you go look at the price of lentils and peas and all them crops. Well, they're looking for acres because there's nobody planting them. Everybody's going corn and beans. And so I think try to be an opportunist, but in the back of your mind, thinking as you're doing this, you're helping your soil. You're getting your better soil.
Right. Okay. We have a question from Matt Lawrence. He says he's a no-till diverse mix cover crop corn soybean rotation in southern Indiana. This is our first year of conventional no seed treatment corn. I'm considering cattle or sheep. Everyone says the animals give so much back, but isn't most of the grazing of cover crops going to animal weight gain and then leaving the farm? Also, won't I lose the cover crop residue weed suppression if animals eat the covers?
That was a long question. I'm going to turn the volume up a little bit.
Oh, sure.
But so anyway, I think that, so basically what they're asking, Julie, is what do we, if you can raise a cover crop in a crop and then graze it, is that what you're looking for?
Well, I think he's asking about if you're grazing the cover crop, doesn't most of it leave with the animal weight gain instead of staying on the farm? And then also, doesn't the grazing sort of counteract the weed suppression that you would normally get from cover crops?
The rate of gain doesn't bother me because if you have the right mix out there, you're going to get the rate of gain. And as far as the soils involved, and I might not be answering this right, as far as the soils involved, anytime you have a living root, that really helps with the impact on the soil. But I still think that when you graze cover crops, you really have to be ready to manage. And but I think you can do both if you manage them right. Brandon, you want to help me on this?
I think you hit the nail on the head there. If you're managing it correctly, that can be helpful. So, but I think you mentioned it in one of your slides that they only use a certain percentage of what they're grazing, and the rest goes out the back end too.
Yeah, Dan, I thought you said 20% was used by the animal and 80% goes out the back.
That's correct, of what they eat. And
right.
Then, we always leave a third. We know how many pounds there, and we're going to leave a third that we don't plan on them grazing. They would eat it, but we're moving them on. We're not letting them. There's a third of it we're not letting them eat.
So you still have effective ground cover with leaving a third of it out there then?
That's correct.
And so that's helping.
If you have the right mix.
Correct.
But I really, you guys, no matter who's grazing cover crops or what you're doing, I really emphasize where you take a biomass, go get a square yard, 2 or 3 different places and send it in. There's a lot of labs will do that and find out what you've got because that's so important. Then you know what you can feed, how many days. You get back into that management deal, and I think that's really important to emphasize on that.
Great. Gary has another question, and he says, do you feel that you need animals in a no-till operation?
No, repeat that, please.
He just asked, do you feel that you actually need animals in a no-till operation?
As I think that's a very good question, and I think that's one step to if you've got livestock, that's another step. On our farm, there's a lot of our ground doesn't have livestock. The boys are working to where they're moving them out more, but we're in a 34-mile circle, so I think you can be very successful with the no-till, diversified rotation, even work cover crops. Like with us, if we're going to work cover crops in, it's going to be behind winter wheat. and because and then we'll go to corn the next year, and a lot of that is not grazed. I think that it's just a premium that if you've got cattle, if you don't have cattle, you're still gonna be successful if you do the other practices.
Yeah. Okay. Virginia Lamb didn't have a question, but she wanted to say that was amazing. So thanks, Dan. Charles de Villiers has a question. Is it possible to get rid of compaction without tillage?
Compaction's management. So you're saying if the soil is compacted, can you get rid of it?
I think
that's if you notice that deal, you guys. If you've got compaction, like one of our compaction that really helps is our sunflowers in a rotation, deep rooted, very fibrous, really big root. So you can get rid of compaction, but you've got to think that how do we get that compaction? Well, a lot of times the compaction, your soils weren't really ready for the traffic that you put on, but that's why, like in some of our cover crop mixes, a lot of times, and I can't do it very often, but I'll put sunflowers in our mix. And basically, between sunflowers and radishes, you're getting your tuber going down to break the compaction. Turnips will help some, but there's a lot of ways with that with the Nebraska family. But it doesn't cost hardly anything to throw a full seeding rate of sunflowers is like 4.5 pounds. So you put a half a pound of sunflowers in, the birds and the bees and the livestock, they love sunflowers. Our cattle go to sunflowers. You think, why would they go after something like that? But they do. And so anyway, you can, but it's another, I hate to keep saying it, it's another management deal. But you go to Brandon and find out, just talk through this on what you need to use. And there's a lot of cover crops out there that will help that compaction issue.
Absolutely. I think, if you know your goals, or you're going to go out there and try to break up compaction, Dan hit it on the head there. That sunflowers are effective, radishes are effective. Anything Nebraska's families are very effective on that. So there's certainly items available to help get rid of some of that compaction, but it's a process. It takes some time though too, and it goes down to management, like Dan said.
Okay, great. Tyler Browsey is asking, do you use herbicide to terminate your cover crops before no-tilling a cash crop? And do you ever have any issues with slug damage from the cash crop? I'm sorry. Do you ever have? I'm sorry?
Yeah, I think I know he's asking if grubs are a problem in next year.
Right. Mm-hmm.
We don't have any. We're dry enough, whatever. But as far as that, you guys, there's a lot of material out there from the NRCS and about the chemicals you can use. A lot of times we let frost terminate our covers. The one thing I like about someone like a kale will go into December and still be green. It doesn't, oats, that's one thing about oats in your mix. Oats doesn't realize that fall's coming. You plant like a winter wheat or something, they say fall's coming, or the mills, they start shutting down. And oats isn't smart enough. It just keeps growing. So you'll have green. But I really, a lot of times we use our normal farming practices going to corn after cover, our normal chemical programs. But there's a lot of information out there about what chemicals, I know there's a lot of issues with water hemp, and there's people doing a lot of work. Lee Breeze from North Dakota, the guys from SDSU, Jason Miller is a very good resource where the chemicals you can use to put a pre down before your cover crop to help with some of them weeds that you want to hold back. And they're having good success with it, but there's a lot of resources out there.
Okay, great. Charles Crofton Atkins says, if you were given thrashed, degraded, salinated soil, how would you rebuild the soil given the tools of agronomy, cattle, and sheep?
So he's talking on native grass or just grass, degraded grass?
I guess degraded salinated soil.
You know, we do, you know, a lot of times on degraded soils, or what I'll usually try to do is I'll go in there with a pulse crop, like a forage, like go a forage pea and something like that. And then the main reason is I give it a new diet, because most of your degraded soils have just come off of grass, or degraded soils have had way too much grass. They've had the same diet. So basically what I would look at degraded soils and see what diet they had before, and I'd just change the diet, because a lot of times there's kind of conflict if it's the same crop after crop after crop, farmland or pasture. Well, we've taken farmland back, or grass back. We tried, and I learned this the hard way. We had 170 acres up in our pasture that they homesteaded, and then they left, and it was crested wheatgrass. And so I was trying to get it back to production, and we did. But the first year I planted the sorghum sedan grass, and it was a failure. And then after that, I learned that so I went a broadleaf on a grass, and then we got it back into sync, but made it pretty productive.
Okay, great. Matt Lawrence wanted to come back. So he had the question earlier about the no-traded corn. He says, I want to add a bit to clarify. With conventional no-trait corn, I cannot use a post herbicide. I need all the fall cover crop residue to suppress summer weeds. I want to incorporate cattle for soil health, but I'm hung up on losing residue. What management can I incorporate?
So if you incorporate cattle, or what herbicide to put on as a post? Brandon, can you hear? I'm sorry. It might be my speaker too.
I think he wants to. I think that the gist of the question is he wants to incorporate cattle for the soil health side of things, but he's really hung up on losing that residue that's out there, because he wants to have residue cover into the following year for weed control.
I think, sorry, Julie, I apologize for not being able to hear that, but I think that gets back into the management deal, where on a normal deal, you could maybe leave them there for 2 weeks, 3 weeks. But I think that you always have a living root there. It's going to be, I think you can do it, but I hate to keep saying that management deal, but that's what it is, you guys. And you just have to watch when you do it. And I understand you're grazing your cover crops, and that's what, if you don't feel good about turning something out in it, you just don't do it. I mean, there comes a time. There was one young guy, producer, that we ran into 2019, and he went and planted every acre on his farm. The cover crop's going to graze them all, and he had a complete wreck the next year because they overgrazed them. They stayed on it when it's too wet. They trampled a lot of compaction, and so you really got to be careful. Then another thing is, I'm talking, and this might not be answering your question right, but I know it won't be. But if the farther you get into this soil health, the farther you get into no-till, the farther you get into soil aggregations, the more healthy, structured soil you have, you're going to get away with a lot more. And another thing I'd like to really emphasize: anybody that's doing anything, if you when going forward, if you do it on a small scale, say you've got 160 acres, take 20 acres and try it. It might be a complete failure, but you just messed up on 20 acres. You can do more. We're not going to do this overnight. Just how long it took us. You're not going to do this overnight. So be patient and keep trying.
Excellent. That's a good answer. All right. Well, that was all of the questions that we had. Julie Elliott from Farming Evolution would like to invite you to speak at their event. So wants your contact information. I'm going to guess, Dan, that you're okay with me giving that to her?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, Julie, I will send that to you. I have your email address. So I guess with that said, thank you guys so much. Before we conclude, I just want to give a heads up to everybody. When you log off, you will receive a questionnaire to complete, and we'd really appreciate that if you'd fill it out and send it back to us so it can help us with planning for future webinars. Secondly, we'll be making available a replay of today's webinar in the event that you want to go back and review it. So that's going to be up on our No-Till Farmer website later today. And once again, I'd like to thank Dan Forgey and Brandon Middendorp for this discussion about integrating cover crops in a diversified no-till operation. And I'd like to thank La Crosse Seed for sponsoring the webinar. And of course, thanks to all of you for joining us. Guys, thank you so much. I hope you have a great day. Any last words?
Thank you for having us.
Thanks, you guys. And just think soil health, you guys. That's the we have to do this, so that's the future.
Absolutely. As you said, so much to do, so little time. So thanks, everybody, and have a great day.